Spoken English survived the Danish invasion. But as the 9th century drew to a close, the written culture was in a ruinous state, and King Alfred was concerned. When Alfred looked at the state of his kingdom, he was appalled. The scholars in the monasteries had once made England the greatest powerhouse of Christian teaching in Europe. But 150 years had passed since the high days of Bede, and the scholarly tradition had declined, hastened on its way by a century of Viking raids. In all the country, Alfred could barely find a handful of priests who could read and understand Latin. And if they couldn't understand Latin, they couldn't pass on the teachings of the religious books that told people how to lead virtuous lives. They couldn't save souls. Where the written word had once flourished, Alfred now found only chronic spiritual sickness. He looked for a cure. One way was to educate more clergy in Latin. But that wasn't enough. He hit on a more radical solution, a solution that hinged not on Latin, but on English. And he took English to new heights of achievement. In the preface to his own translation of Pope Gregory's Pastoral Care, Alfred wrote, "I remembered how, before it was all ravaged and burned, I'd seen how the churches throughout all England stood filled with treasures and books. And there was also a multitude of God's servants who had very little benefit from those books because they couldn't understand anything of them, since they were not written in their own language." Their own language was, of course, English. Alfred didn't want to do away with Latin, but he realized that it would be far easier to teach people to read books written in the language they spoke. The best scholars could then go on to learn Latin and join holy orders. The rest would still have access to scholarship and spiritual guidance, but it would be written in English. Here, in his capital city of Winchester, Alfred drew up a plan. It was an extraordinarily imaginative project to promote literacy and restore the English language. "We should," he wrote, "translate certain books which are most necessary for all men to know into the language that we can all understand, and also arrange it, as with God's help we very easily can if we have peace, so that all the youth of free men now among the English people, who have the means to be able to devote themselves to it, may be set to study for as long as they're of no other use, until the time they're able to read English writing well." Alfred had 5 books of religious instruction, philosophy and history translated from Latin into English, a laborious and costly undertaking. Copies were sent out to the 12 bishops of his kingdom for their wisdom to be spread as widely as possible. To each bishop, to emphasize the importance and value of the project, Alfred sent a costly pointer used to underline the text. This is the Alfred jewel. Many historians believe that it formed the head of one of those pointers. Crafted in crystal, enamel and gold, it was discovered in 1693 in Somerset and is now on show at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. It's inscribed, "Alfred had me made," in English. Alfred the Great had made the English language the jewel in his crown. Here in Winchester, Alfred had established what was effectively a publishing house. Other projects he undertook included the commissioning of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, detailing hundreds of years of history. Alfred died in 899. One of his legacies was an English language which was more prestigious and widely read than ever before. There was nothing to compare with this range of written vernacular, history, philosophy, poetry, anywhere else in mainland Europe. English was out on its own. By the middle of the 11th century, English seemed secure, but now other invaders were waiting in the wings, and English was about to face its greatest threat ever.